The highly confidential Pentagon leaks from the United States military tightly guarded registry that has thrust Kenya into a diplomatic tiff with the United Nations, suggesting that at least United Nations is uncomfortable with the leadership of William Ruto is at the center of a new storm. And a latest statement from Foreign Affairs CS opens a lid on what exactly is behind the scene bad blood. In this podcast, I want to face the facts and the reality. Why do you think United Nations rejected William Ruto's presidency after swearing in September? Welcome to the Bold Analysis. Thank you very much for your support, and I want us to move swiftly to this. According to the Pentagon leaks, which is leaked from a former military man, it shows two things. America was spying on the UN officials. And according to what has been said, in December last year, 2022, leaders met in the African Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C. Mrs. Amina Mohammed, who is the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, which I believe also resides in Kenya, allegedly told Guterres, her boss, Mr. Guterres, that President William Ruto is ruthless and she does not trust him. I worked at UN Habitat, so I'm acquainted a bit with what happens at that UN body or what is around. But there, for your information, the UN headquarters in Kenya is the largest in Africa. And the headquarters, most of those UN bodies, the UN Habitat, the UNEP, quite a number of them, the headquarters are actually the one that is at the Gigiri. So the Gigiri-based headquarter is the epicenter of the UN activities in Africa. So this statement cannot be taken lightly in terms of this mistrust. Now, I have taken time to peruse and listen to what the international media are actually reporting about these international leaks. And it tells me something. And I can challenge you, just go and find out and Google how American media stations, TV stations in America, are actually reporting the Pentagon leaks. You'll realize that they have concentrated more on the implication of the leaks, the implication of that leak to the Russia-Ukraine war. That's what, to them, the angle they have taken is on the implication on that end. Now, back in the country, I want to believe that maybe the intention could be, the big intention, that tells you that the big intention of these Pentagon leaks was really to poke holes into the Russia-Ukraine war. That was at the center of it. So when you see William Ruto's name being dragged into it, then I have to say that it cannot be taken lightly. People who are into this diplomatic relations will actually tell you that Kenya Kwanza and the Kenya Kwanza bloggers and sympathizers are normally very quick to react, but you'll understand why there is total silence. This is not one that you approach with a pedestrian mindset, because there is more than what catches the eye, and it also has its own implications. UN and Kenya, after the UN had not really, after William Ruto's ascending to power following the presidential elections of 2022, they're juggling with two problems. One is the fact that America is spying on the UN leaders. You're going to ask why. That's number one. Number two, this report has also been released, targeting, knowing very well that now that it is out, there is going to be a strained relationship between the United Nations body and the country's leadership. So I was just watching where they have allegedly arrested some few fellows there as people behind the leak, and they're still pursuing those who did the Pentagon leaks. Actually, can I shock you that the person that has leaked it is someone below in terms of the pecking, in terms of the hierarchy. These Pentagon leaks, I understand they are highly confidential documents that can only be consumed or can only be in possession. The only people that can be in possession of them are the high-ranking members of, or rather high-ranking officials in United States, in the United States government, and even the military. So like in the country, this is allegedly a document that the only people that should be having is probably President Ruto, not even his deputy, President Ruto, and military heads. But then it has been released by someone who is just probably an office secretary. So that's what I'm saying, that they are highly classified documents, and the fact that it was released by the junior leaders tells it all. There is something that is going on, and for me, I paid attention to it because the way the US reporting, they're talking more on the Russia-Ukraine war. So where are we in terms of that? UN boss, at one point, US is not in good terms with the UN for this. The UN boss, Antonio Guterres, last year when he was negotiating between Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey, a deal that will see transport of food stuff from Kiev. Remember, after that war, there were sanctions, and sanctions on Russia, and then the supply chain of wheat, the grain from those two nations was actually affected. But the largest producer, or rather exporter of grain in the world, amongst them, is Russia. So food disruption was actually affected even Africa. That is why when Uhuru Kenyatta was telling you guys last year that Mimi sikuleta vita Ukraine, because what's happening in Ukraine and Russia is partly to blame for what we are going through in this country. So this came in the backdrop of that negotiation, and America was a bit uncomfortable with a deal that was struck by the UN known as the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which was struck last year amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. This deal was struck just to help the other countries that were affected. Of course, many nations were affected by that war, to make sure that the food stuff could still be moved out of Russia despite of that war. So I can tell you without fear of contradiction, we are in the middle of we found ourselves in the middle of that Russia-Ukraine war, and I don't know why. But however, I'll try to bring it home and explain. To some extent, in what I am seeing here, United Nations clearly did not feel comfortable, or rather, did not approve William Ruto's presidency, even after he was sworn in. And I want to tell you in my observations that I can make, what could be behind this kind of mistrust in terms of what exactly is going on. Kindly make sure you subscribe to our channel. Now, I think Ruto has made a couple of few mistakes. One, I think the dalliance with America. Ruto was seen as America's firstborn, in Africa. So Ruto had a dalliance with America, and America is supporting the Ukraine side of it, is why they crossed path with Russia, with UN, because UN seems to be taking a neutral position, or rather taking a position that can still benefit people, and they supported largely Russia. So they questioned Kenyan position on the war. So what's happening here is UN is a bit distracted or rather uncomfortable with our Kenyan position on the war. That's a bit of it. The other thing I am seeing is what Waziri Alfred Mutua said yesterday. Do you know that Kenya has defaulted in our obligation in terms of subscriptions to some of these international bodies? And could be including the UN. Could be. And I was shocked yesterday, also the CS saying we've not been paid. I think we've not paid our diplomatic obligations. We've not met our diplomatic obligations, including the missions abroad for the last 6 months, and we are even threatening them, those who are asking questions, for evictions. So, in terms of our diplomatic obligations, for the last 6 months, we are in the month of April. For the last 6 months, that means from last year, November. This report emerged somewhere in December. So I can also see that being a possibility. You know, let me tell you something happens in UN. It is a practice. It is a practice I witnessed there. So when we were there, we had, personally, I was a communication consultant. Then we used to work with fellows they come in as interns, and they come from other member countries. For example, maybe they're dispatched from Ghana, Mexico, and even Germany. But when we're in the country, they're fully being funded and being supported by the Kenyan government. So, unaweza pata an intern, Kenyan intern working at UN doesn't get a single shilling. While an intern who is from Argentina or Mexico, I didn't say Argentina, let me just say Mexico and Germany. Is it Mexico? Yes, Mexico and Germany are getting fully funded and being supported by their mother countries. I even came to realize that even those who work under UN, and not necessarily in this country, even outside, they're not getting the support. But do you know that a Kenyan, when atapata opportunity, who gets an opportunity to the UN, probably even to start, like even me, I started as an intern. I did an intern for 3 months. Then after that, I worked for another 8 months as a communication consultant. So what happens is this. You're not being supported. Another country, because it's a big opportunity to network and to create your professional portfolio. But here in this country, the government doesn't support you. And I remember by then, the union office was very categorical that they needed to get a way to support their fellows here. So that bit of it, according to me, could amount to this. The other thing I see here is that I think the last year's general election, that was the prefect of William Ruto's 5th presidential, the presidential win, or rather announcement, was America. And the UN, maybe they did not contradict, but they felt uncomfortable by the developments that happened. Let me tell you something, Kenyans. Politically, the public have bought a narrative that there is no problem with our elections, even if the commissions are divided. In the international, in America or Germany or other countries, that is a big deal. And let me tell you, sometimes we normally despise it as Raila said and Raila did that. But that is the truth. In the international relations, or rather at the international level, that is a very, very big thing that you cannot despise. So that's one thing I am seeing. And that's why I'm making that observation, that the United Nations understood that to some extent, William Ruto's win was lifted. And America projected themselves to Kenya as pro-democracy. And they embraced William Ruto. The first tour after the first foreign trip by president was in America after going to bury the Queen, then after Queen United Nations General Assembly in America. So in New York. So that's it. That's the truth. That being non-committal on diplomatic obligations, and they doubted their thought in terms of the controversial win of President Ruto. The other thing I'm seeing is ICC. Ruto came in power, and he had a lot of burdens, and I remember us analyzing that. Taking the position of the church as the key sanitizer was an opportunity to make sure that it sheds off the ICC burdens that were going on. And some of these international bodies are still keeping those memories, or rather, they're still keeping those records of data. And maybe that is why William Ruto's international credentials, diplomatic credentials, at international market, as international scene, is actually creating some mixed signals, because it's not lost to some of these leaders that Ruto was also at one point heading to the Hague. So I see that as a possibility. I don't know, but there is also something happened. Uhuru had given a deal. I think it was even land for UN to build a headquarter. I think the headquarters are supposed to be moved from Gigiri to somewhere else, and that's partly what was going on. We are I'm not sure whether that has really been effected, or remember the government has really accepted that commitment to continue. So there's a lot in table, but according to me, I think we are getting ourselves into the red tape.